Hello there and welcome to the Highmaul Looking for Raid guide. My name is Tuskeh and in this video we'll discuss Wing 1 of Highmaul, the Walled City, covering everything from trash to the bosses and how to handle them. Role-specific information will also be included. To enter Highmaul, you require an item level of 615, and I thoroughly suggest that you complete the Proving Grounds for your chosen role on Silver as well. Of course, as with all pickup groups, patience is the most important quality you can have. Wipes might happen, so be prepared to put up with mistakes. Now, let's get started. In this wing, you'll face Kharghar Bladefist, the Butcher, and Brackenspore. They all drop item level 640 non-tier gear. As soon as you enter the instance, there will be an elevator with an ogre standing upon it in front of you. Talk to him to begin the trash. It's likely that someone else will do this before you, but if you miss the elevator as it heads up, don't panic. Just talk to the ogre to get teleported into the stadium. After a couple of minutes of roleplay, the trash will spawn from the doorway below the Imperator's balcony. Here, you'll face Volgor and some ogres, the Bladespire sorcerers. Volgor himself is just a Saberon that takes reduced damage while the sorcerers are alive, and the sorcerers cast a ranged attack that can be interrupted and a molten bomb that puts fire on the ground. Avoid fire and try to kill the sorcerers first. Volgor himself has a cleave attack, so tanks face him away from the raid. He'll also periodically cast Earthbreaker, a line fissure that damages anyone it hits. It also spawns an ad called a Smouldering Stone Guard. Tanks, make sure you pick up these stone guards quickly since they'll spawn far away from you and will most likely go onto the healers. They don't do anything except just melee attacks, so cleave them down. Kill the sorcerers, then Volgor. Once Volgor dies, everything else despawns. After some more roleplay, Kharghar will jump down, stand underneath the Imperator's balcony, and then become attackable. Kharghar is the first boss, and he's a fairly easy one-phase fight that involves jumping into the crowd to kill ads. Bloodlust on the pull. Tanks, you'll want to tank Kharghar in the dead center of the room. This makes the whole fight easier for everyone. You also have to worry about Impale. This stuns you for 8 seconds and deals damage. Healers, just keep the tanks alive through it with single target heals. When the Impale ends, you'll receive a debuff called Open Wounds that increases the damage you take from successive Impales. You'll want to tank swap on about 2 stacks of this. As a note for everyone, during the fight, the skulls around the room, 4 in total, will rise up, revealing flame pillars underneath them. These leave fire in an aura around them. Stay out of the fire at all times. Additionally, ads within the crowd will periodically throw down either bombs or green pools of poison. Stay out of these too. Staying spread out will help you significantly here. Another reason that the ranged and healers will want to be spread out around the battle area is because Kharghar will periodically use an ability called Blade Dance to deal damage in an AoE around random ranged players. Staying spread out mitigates this damage nicely. Kharghar will also use Berserker Rush. This is a very important ability. He'll target a random player, start cleaving wildly in front of him, and start chasing them. This lasts for about 20 seconds, and he'll run faster and faster and deal more and more damage in front of him over that time. If he reaches you, you'll be in a lot of trouble, so you have to interrupt this cast. How? Well, you have to kite him into the fire left by the flame pillars. If he enters this fire, he'll be interrupted, yell loudly, and then return to the tank. Kharghar's biggest ability here is Chain Hurl. He'll knock everyone away from him and then select 5 people. The tank with the highest amount of open wounds, 1 random healer, and 3 random DPS. He'll attach them to chains, whirl them around his head, and then throw them into the crowd. When you land, you'll be surrounded by bad guys, so the tank needs to pick them up nice and fast. While in the stands, you'll have a brief period of time to kill members of the crowd. Try to prioritize killing the Iron Bombers and the Drunken Bile Slingers, as these are the ones that throw bad things down into the raid. The Bombers leave bombs on the ground, and the Bile Slingers have a breath, so tanks face them away from the raid and keep moving. You don't have much time here. The Iron Grunts just have a slow and can be AoE'd down. Really, you can just mass pull here, since there's nothing here that's too dangerous. Kill as many ads in the crowd as you can in the short amount of time that you have. After your time is up, an ogre called the Highmaul Sweeper will run past you and knock you back into the arena. And that is the whole fight. Tanks swap on 2 stacks of Impale, kite Kharghar into flame pillars, stay spread out, kill ads while in the crowd, don't stand in the bad. Once Kharghar dies, a short roleplay cinematic will play that I will not show here because of spoilers. Once that ends, it's on to the next boss, the Butcher. Now you can choose to pull the trash leading up to him, or you can just drop down into the water as shown on screen now. An invisible wall may be placed here in the future to prevent this tactic, but for now you can just drop down. However, there is one trash mob that you will have to kill even if you do hop down. Crush, a boar. He's kind of a mini-boss, but his only ability is Boar Rush, where he will target a random player, bash his tail against the ground, and then charge forwards. This deals damage too and knocks back anyone he charges through, so just stay spread out and try to avoid being knocked into the Butcher. Now, the Butcher is a one-phase fight that requires your healers to maintain alertness. Tanks, you'll have to worry about 3 abilities. One is Heavy-Handed, which is a buff the Butcher has for the entire fight. This makes his melee attacks hit the target and the second closest target within 5 yards. If there isn't a second target to hit, both attacks will hit the first target. This means you'll want to face him away from the raid and stand on top of one another to split his damage. Next is the Cleaver, which puts a stacking dot on you, but it can be avoided if you either parry or dodge it. And finally, the Tenderizer, which is just a big hit that increases the damage you take from it each time. Just taunt on 3 to 4 stacks of the Tenderizer and you should be good. The most important mechanic of this fight is Cleave, and the Gushing Wounds debuff that it applies. Now, unlike most Cleave mechanics, this isn't a conal attack that the boss does. Instead, it's an ability that strikes players in melee range, prioritizing the largest clump. It splits very high damage and leaves a debuff called Gushing Wounds on them, which is just a stacking dot. Once it reaches 10, it will instantly kill you. But this isn't a problem. The stacks should never ever get that high, so don't worry about it. The whole raid, save for the healers, should stack up in one group behind the Butcher to split his cleave damage. And the healers, and maybe 1 or 2 ranged DPS, should stack up at range, but not too far away. Just 10 or so yards behind the raid is good. Keep AoE heals constantly going as the cleaves come in on the clump of melee. The Butcher's only other mechanic is Bounding Cleave. This is tied to his energy bar, which slowly increases over time. Once it reaches full, the Butcher will knock everyone in the raid backwards, and then charge up a Bounding Cleave. After a couple of seconds, he'll jump to the largest group of players at range, and then do a single cleave. Then he'll return to the tanks and the fight goes back to normal. This is why you have a group of healers at range. This healer group just needs to stack up after being knocked back. Having a marker to stack helps a lot here. And then they just soak the cleave, and by doing this, the Gushing Wounds stack on the rest of the raid drops off. Just repeat this process until the Butcher dies. Tanks stack up, swap on 3 to 4 stacks of the Tenderizer, everyone but the healers and a couple of ranged DPS stack up behind him, blanket heal the raid, the ranged group and the healers soak the Bounding Cleave, then repeat. Just note that at 30% health, he will Frenzy, which makes him attack, cleave, and gain energy faster. This just speeds the whole fight up. Use Bloodlust at this point and nuke him down nice and fast, while keeping everyone but the healers and a couple of ranged DPSs stacked up in melee. Those not stacked up in melee should be stacked up at range. Once the Butcher falls, you have 2 more trash packs left. The first pack, consisting of Night Twisted Pale Orcs, is pretty easy. The large Pale Orcs have an AoE damage and knockback, so tanks keep them away from the ranged, and the small Pale Orcs jump on random players and use Devour to stun them. This can't be interrupted, but you can stun them in return, so stop their channel of Devour with your own stuns. The final trash pack, consisting of Orcs, can be quite dangerous, so CC will help here, but it isn't 100% necessary. The War Master uses an AoE Enrage to buff the trash, so if you do CC, kill him first. Otherwise, you can just use anti-enrage effects like Shiv, Soothe, or Tranquilizing Shot to remove the enrage on the trash. The Flame Technicians will jump to a random player and slowly start spinning, channeling a flamethrower as they do so. Don't stand in the fire, it hurts. Finally, the Blood Mages, the most dangerous of the group, use Corrupted Blood to put a dispellable debuff on random players in the raid. Healers, make sure you dispel this as soon as possible because it deals high damage. And they also cast Blood Bolt on the tank, which deals high damage. They can be stunned, CC'd, and interrupted, so keep them locked down as much as you can as you kill this trash pack. Brackenspore is the final boss fight in this wing, and is another one-phase fight. We'll discuss his mechanics first, then we'll discuss how to deal with them as a whole, because this fight is actually quite complicated. As of the date of this recording, you should not worry about using the flamethrowers on the floor, as the mechanic that they counter is not even an issue, making them practically useless. But if for some reason this fight is ever changed, here's a quick rundown of how the flamethrowers work, just so you know what to do. Picking one of these up will give you an extra action button. Using this will activate the flamethrower, sending out flames in front of you in a small cone. This deals no damage, but it will burn away any moss on the ground. This moss is kind of a green swirly cloud that comes in from the sides of the fight and slowly spreads inwards, dealing damage to players that stand in it and healing the boss and his adds if they stand in it. The flamethrowers will burn away this creeping moss and give you a buff that increases your damage for a few seconds as a reward. Your flamethrower also has a heat meter, and if it reaches full, it will become unusable for several moments. It's important to remember this because using the extra action button will toggle the flamethrower on indefinitely. You have to press the button again to toggle it off. Try to make sure your heat meter never goes to full. As I said before, if the moss ever becomes an issue, that is how the flamethrowers work. But the boss died for me before it even got close to being a problem, so it's probably not going to be necessary in the slightest. Now, let's talk Bracken Spore. Tanks, you have to worry about two things: Rot and Necrotic Breath. Rot is just your tank swap mechanic. It's a stacking damage over time effect. You want to swap on about 4 stacks. Necrotic Breath is the dangerous ability. This deals heavy damage in a cone in front of him over a few seconds and reduces all healing you take by 99%. You can't move out of this, he will move with you. As such, healers, you have to keep the tanks at 100% health as much as possible during this fight, and tanks, you want to use a cooldown to help survive this breath. And since this is such a movement-heavy fight, make sure you never face Bracken Spore into the raid when the breath is nearby. Using boss mods like Deadly Boss mods or Bigwigs will give you a timer for the breath, letting you know when it's okay to move. Bracken Spore's main ability is Infesting Spores. This is a channel that dots the raid with a stacking damage over time effect. It starts at 1 and stacks up to 10. There's no way to stop him from doing this, so healers, use your powerful area of effect healing spells to heal up the raid once Infesting Spores comes in. The dot that it leaves only lasts for a few seconds once he's finished channeling, so it's not too hard to deal with. It's just a big burst of damage on the raid. Next, let's talk about Bracken Spore's adds. He has one real add and two kind of pseudo adds. The real add is a fungal giant called a Fungal Flesh Eater, which needs to be tanked by the tank not currently holding Bracken Spore. It grows stronger over time, so should be prioritized by all damage dealers. Its only ability is Decay, which deals heavy damage to the raid. It can, however, be interrupted, so make sure you do so. Never let a Decay cast get off. Bracken Spore's pseudo-adds are Spore Shooters and Mind Fungus. Mind Fungus is just a stationary mushroom that is placed in the ranged and slows the casting speed of anyone nearby. Just kill it super fast as it has very little health. And if you're worried about your casting speed, just step to the side to avoid it while it's still alive. The Spore Shooters are stationary enemies that shoot spores at the raid, which are just bolts that deal AoE damage to the first person it hits in a line. This can be intercepted, and probably should be done so, by mobile damage dealers like hunters. The ranged DPS should kill the Spore Shooters as quickly as they can. The last mechanic of this fight is good for the raid, actually: Living Mushrooms and Rejuvenating Mushrooms. These are green and blue respectively, and are large mushrooms that spawn in random places around the room, normally one at a time. These are important for the raid and especially for the healers. You see, these mushrooms can be targeted and healed. They start at 50% health and slowly begin to die if they're not healed. If they reach 100% health, they will activate a beneficial effect for all nearby players. This continues until they die, so healers keep healing them up even after their effects have activated. The green living mushrooms will heal everyone nearby for stupid high amounts of health, and the blue rejuvenating mushrooms will grant everyone nearby a 30% haste increase and a dramatic increase to mana regeneration. Healers, it's important to remember that these mushrooms will rapidly kill themselves if not healed, so it's important to keep them spot healed at all times. But eventually they will die faster than you can heal them, so just keeping them alive for as long as you possibly can will work. A lot of the time, healing a living mushroom and letting it handle the raid will counter almost all of the damage coming out, as long as the raid is stacked up on it. And using your most costly heals on a rejuvenating mushroom will consume less mana than it restores. And of course, DPS, standing in the blue mushrooms, will increase your damage, because you have more haste. It's like having a permanent bloodlust. Okay, so those are the mechanics of the fight. How does it all mesh together? Well, first of all, at all times the raid should be stacked on the boss, including the ranged and the healers. Just stack up behind him. You'll almost always be moving as a group. Bloodlust on the pull. After the fight begins, you'll have to deal with Spore Shooters, a Mind Fungus, and a Fungal Flesh Eater. Melee DPS, your priority is the Mind Fungus, as you're not affected by its slow to cast time, then the Fungal Flesh Eater, then you can return to the boss. Ranged DPS, your priority is the Mind Fungus, then the Spore Shooters, then the Fungal Flesh Eater if it is still alive, then the boss. Keep this priority system in mind. Hunters and any other ranged DPS that are feeling heroic, you can stand outside of the group to intercept the Spore Shooter's bolts to lower the raid damage. As you do this, Bracken Spore will be using Rot and Necrotic Breath. Tanks keep him faced away from the raid and swap at 4 stacks of Rot. Whichever tank is not tanking the boss, stay behind him with the raid and tank any Fungal Flesh Eaters that spawn. Remember that you may have to swap while a Fungal Flesh Eater is alive, meaning that you must trade enemies. This can be a bit tricky, but make sure that if you're the one tanking the boss, that you only swap and taunt the Flesh Eater once the other tank taunts Bracken Spore off of you. They should go first, not you, because you never want him facing the group because you go first and the other tank isn't ready. Next, a mushroom will spawn. This will always be a living mushroom at first, first, but after that it can be either a green or a blue, or it could even be both. It's best for the tanks to start moving Brackenspore towards this mushroom, with the raid keeping close behind. Stack up on the mushroom, and healers keep it healed. Brackenspore will use infesting spores, and the raid will take no damage if they're stacked up on a living mushroom, as it will just heal them all up. If the raid is stacked up on a blue mushroom, the healers can go crazy with their AoE heals and not have to worry about their mana, so that should handle the damage. More spore shooters and mind fungus will spawn, and there will be another fungal flesh eater add. That's basically the whole fight. Just repeat this process as much as you can. However, just note that if you have a choice between a green mushroom and a blue mushroom, always pick the blue one. The haste bonus is great, and the mana regeneration will almost always top the healer's mana off. So healers, you can feel free to drain your mana pool fast in this fight. Don't hold back. As a note, if your tanks decide to never move Brackenspore because apparently they're asleep, feel free to move to the blue mushrooms as long as you remain in range of the raid. The mana regeneration from being inside a fully healed blue mushroom is very important for the healers, so tanks, make sure you stay awake and you move a lot. But, of course, never position him so that he breathes into the raid. That'll basically be a wipe. That's the whole fight, really. It's pretty long and complicated, but that's the gist of it all. Kill adds, stand in and heal beneficial mushrooms, keep the boss faced away from the raid, move as a single group, heroic ranged DPS stand in front of the spore shooters to absorb their shots. Communication and movement is crucial in this fight, and you'll be moving around quite a lot, so make sure you're always ready to move at a moment's notice. Once Brackenspore dies, you have completed the wing. Congratulations! That's it for this guide. I hope you enjoyed it and found it helpful. If you have any thoughts, questions, comments, or suggestions, you can contact me using the links in the description, or you can just leave a comment. Make sure you subscribe to catch these videos as soon as they come out. As always, I offer my heartfelt thanks to those who contribute to the channel's continued existence through the Patreon system, with special thanks going out to Ricka Bailey, Jason DeBoard, Henrik Lundqvist, Sly Knight, Blaz Golk, Sebastian Dormel, Cody Wyatt, John Dolan, Till Altmans, and Connor Hu. Thank you very much for watching, and I wish you the best of luck in Highmaul.